Good morning, everyone. I hope it is a good morning. I hope you have your coffee ready. I have mine. And this morning we're going to talk about manners. Manners maketh. Manners maketh everyone. And rather than throw a slideshow at you or, lecture on various topics, we're just going to have a bit of a conversation here. Let me make sure I can see the comments. But let me start with a nice definition of etiquette that I found. And this one is from the American Ladies and Gentlemen's Manual of Elegance, Fashion, and True Politeness. And I'll have to find the date in a second. I forgot to jot that down. But hints on etiquette. It says general observations. Etiquette is the barrier which society draws around itself as a protection against offenses the law cannot touch. It is a shield against the intrusion of the impertinent, the improper, and the vulgar. A guard against those obtuse persons who, having neither talent nor delicacy, would be continually thrusting themselves into the society of men to whom their presence might, from the difference of feeling and habit, be offensive and even insupportable. And I think that kind of covers it, don't you? Reading through a bunch of these vintage, antique, 19th century etiquette manuals, the basics stay exactly the same. And then it's always to see about the comfort of others before yourself. You shouldn't say anything that's going to make someone uncomfortable. If somebody does something, makes a sound or spills something, you don't call attention to it. You don't notice it because that would embarrass them, and you don't want to do that. So at its base, it's all very, very simple. Technology can complicate things a bit, but honestly, when you take that step back, it's still the same. So, let's see. This particular book, let me find the title page here. The American Ladies and Gentlemen's Manual of Elegance, Fashion, and True Politeness by Charles William Day, published in 1850. And as always, I found these via, most of these were found via Google Books, but they exist in other collections, including Hathi Trust and archive.org. Now, my absolute favorite of these is called Don't. It's a manual of mistakes and improprieties more or less prevalent in conduct and speech. And the author was listed as censor. And it's actually Oliver Bell Bunce. And he wrote this under a pseudonym, and then later on it was, discovered that he's the one who wrote it, so you can find it under his name now. It's full of things you should not do. At the first chapter is at table. And it says, don't fail at dinner to rise when the ladies leave the table. Remain standing until they have left the room, then reseat yourself. Not as much prevalent today, but it should be. It's a sign of respect. But one of the reasons why this book is my favorite is it features passages like this. Don't come to breakfast in deshabille. A lady's morning toilet should be simple but fresh and tasteful, her hair not in curl papers. A gentleman should wear his morning suit and never his dressing gown. There are men who sit at table in their shirt sleeves. This is an abomination. I think he's right. I think breakfast should be a civilized meal and not something haphazardly thrown together or catch as catch can, grabbed on the way out the door. Once again, it's a sign of respect for your partner, yourself, for the day, to be prepared when you come down to eat. I just see someone supporting these breakfast rules. I went down to get some coffee and some yogurt from the breakfast here in this hotel, and I was wearing regular clothes, a nice sweater, and yet there were people not only in their pajamas but their bathrobes, and it just made me weep for the future of humanity. Yesterday there was someone in shorts and socks, and I grabbed my food and ran, and I've been eating in my room. This is one of my other favorites. It says, don't, as hostess, omit napkins at breakfast or luncheon. To attack coffee and eggs without a napkin may excite our wonder. But how can the practice be defended? Is it anything less than disgusting? I'm a very big fan of napkins. It mentions don't read newspaper or book at table if others are seated with you. Once again, it all goes back to respect. You're there with someone else. Your attention should be on them and not, oh, as I'm doing with, something else that I'm reading. Don't decorate your shirt front with egg or coffee drippings, and don't ornament your coat lapels with grease spots. A little care will prevent these accidents. Few things are more distasteful than to see a gentleman bearing upon his apparel ocular evidence of his breakfast or his dinner. And with that, I'm going to carefully take some coffee and try not to spill it on myself. So does anybody have any questions before I just keep diving into this stuff? Like I said, there's no outline, there's no slides prepared. I wanted to try and find particularly some images of people eating breakfast in their shirt sleeves from the 19th century, but trying to find things like that became a rabbit hole on its own, and I spent far more time looking through various cartoons and caricatures from the 19th century than actually doing the necessary research. So I apologize for that. You're just going to have to look at my grizzled visage for, I guess, the next hour or so. But as I said, any questions at this point? Everybody been having a good weekend? I realized I haven't had a chance to really check in on anything since I did my panel yesterday, but I hope all has been going swimmingly and everybody's been having a great time. Try not to be too loud with that. me find. Let's see, what was the other? Swap between a bunch of tabs here. As you can tell, I am insanely well prepared. So how to correctly and politely pay compliments. Just as clearly and uh, not plainly, but you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to be overly effusive. Um, you just pay the compliment. You know, I really like that dress. I love what you've done with your hair. Just very, very simple. Once again, you're trying not to embarrass anybody, so you don't want to go overboard. But at the same time, you want to make your feelings uh, plain, obvious. Stop stumbling over proper terminology here, but it's just you want to let them know how much you like whatever they've said, whatever they've done, whatever they're wearing, and you just do that as simply as possible. Yeah, there. I ran across a couple of separate passages in a couple of different books that just talk about uh, not going overboard. Just say what you mean, and don't throw on too many adjectives. I think that dress is the most divine garment that has ever been uh, created, and you wear it like a goddess. It, at some point, you just kind of need to tone it down a bit and just say, I think you look amazing. And that's really all it takes. You're out to, make someone else uh, feel good. And that's part and parcel of all of this is you're not out to hurt anybody. You're out to just talk to them and let them know that you think what they're doing is wonderful. Let me see if I can find. I hope I have that tab open here. Nope. And no, and I've already read that. Okay. So I managed to close all of the tabs I had notes from. Let me see if I had copied. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is the. Oh, yes, this is talking about those that are mean spirited, particularly in their sense of humor. Um, and I found this rather important. But this is from the Gentleman and Ladies Book of Politeness and Propriety of Deportment, dedicated to the youth of both sexes. And let's see, this one was published. When was this? Oh, come on. I'll have to go back to the title page after I read the quote. But this is from Elizabeth Selnart. And it says, as to hoaxing, that caustic of fools, and that silly gaiety, excited by the candor or politeness of people whom you falsely cause to believe the most foolish things, because they do not make known to you that they see through this pleasure of stupid fellows. I have nothing to say, except that I have too good an opinion of my reader to suppose that he does not despise them as I do. And I just loved it, because hoaxers, chain pullers, they're just not, once again, they're not making others comfortable. They delight in making others uncomfortable. And that's just not polite, not good manners. You should never delight in anyone else's misfortune. One more quote from this. She says, I only speak to censor, or censure. I therefore entreat my readers not to suffer themselves to be the manufacturers of puns, and to despise this talent of fools and childish means to excite a passing laugh. Not that we cannot repeat in good company one of those rare political bon mots which are happy in every respect, nor that we ought to deprecate this kind of pleasantry before people who are fond of them, still less to tell them what they hear every day, that is poor. To have taste does not authorize us to be impolite. And that's something else that you'll find scattered throughout all of these tomes, is that even if you don't like it, don't disparage it in front of the person who says it, unless it is something that is incredibly vulgar and out of place. And then it is your place to step up and say, that's not right. That's inappropriate. Please don't say such things. The infamous, there are ladies and children present. Once again, they're making those other parties uncomfortable. You should help put a stop to that before it goes too much farther. So let me kick back here and look at the about 1841. So this is Elizabeth Selnart's The Gentleman and Lady's Book of Politeness and Propriety of Deportment, dedicated to the youth of both sexes. I absolutely love all these titles. So let's see. Reading the comments here so I can catch up. Chain pullers are insufferable. Was it mostly the upper classes who studied and followed etiquette manuals, or manners, expectations the same across society, or did it differ with class or occupation? For the most part, I think you're right that it was the, lack of a better term, the entitled, that had the access to the books. And they were able to read and follow these manuals. But good manners were passed down. So much of this is common sense. And parents would try to teach their children, here's how you behave, regardless of social status. I mean, that's a topic that deserves a lot more of a deep dive, is how would the working classes impart this societal knowledge. But it's manners is how you navigate society. It's how you find your way through the various social groups that you find yourself interacting with. If you have no manners, You probably won't find yourself in too many circles because people don't want to be around you. It's just, it's one of those things that if you don't learn early on, you will be mystified as to why people don't want to be friends with you. And it's probably because you're constantly making them uncomfortable, because you're saying things or doing things that just aren't good manners. Exposition always makes me thirsty. I can't claim credit for that, but that's always been a favorite line. Any other questions while we're at this pause? Since I've not even made it through half an hour yet. But let's see. It's impolite of me to keep saying but, so I'll try to stop that. I've found myself learning more and more that the manners and mores of the past are equally valid in today's society, regardless of technological advances. You still don't want to embarrass anybody, even if you are texting, even if it's on a Zoom call. Somebody's, cats are running rampant behind someone in the middle of a very important Zoom meeting. Don't call attention to it. Just go on with the meeting, as hard as that might be. Unless the people actually running, unless the people actually running things do stop and make a note of it, it's not your place to derail the meeting. It's up to the people that are doing it. There's a cartoonist / writer that I follow, and her husband is a professor, and he was teaching or lecturing, to a Zoom class, and she stealthily put a plate of cat treats behind him because he was sitting at the kitchen table. So she put them on the counter and then let the cats know that there were treats to be had. And that was a good 10-15 minute derailment of the lecture. I don't know how happy or unhappy he was with that. I'm sure the cats enjoyed it immensely. But see, I did it again. But I need to go back and watch these things and kind of red pen myself, edit how I'm speaking in front of a crowd, and make sure I have fewer weird utterances and pauses. Let me see if I can find some other pieces from Don't. One of my favorite parts of Don't is the fact that a couple years later, Bunce's wife actually wrote a book called Do. And it was manners from the here's what you should be doing instead of purely from the negative, don't do this, don't do that. But what we have here in front of us is don't. Now this stuff kills me. Now this was 1851, I believe. Don't wear apparel with decided colors or with pronounced patterns. Don't, we address here the male reader for whom this brochure is mainly designed, don't wear anything that is pretty. What have men to do with pretty things? Select quiet colors and unobtrusive patterns, and adopt no style of cutting that belittles the figure. It is right enough that men's apparel should be becoming, that it should be graceful, that it should lend dignity to the figure, but it should never be ornamental, fanciful, grotesque, odd, capricious, nor pretty. Don't wear fancy colored shirts or embroidered shirt fronts. White, plain linen is always in the best taste. Don't wear evening dress in the morning or on any occasion before 6 o'clock or before 6 o'clock dinner. Now that's why there's a formal wear manufacturer known as After Six, is because 6 o'clock was when you changed into your tuxedo for dinner. What was the now I found this interesting. Don't go with your boots unpolished, but don't have the polishing done in the public high street. A gentleman within view of all passers-by, while he is having executed this finishing touch to his toilet, presents a picture more unique than dignified. Now, I will avail myself of any public boot blacks or shoe polish stands whenever I find them, because they're few and far between. And there are times when an expert touch is all it takes to elevate, the skill that you might possess to a higher level. There's it's since been moved around, but at Dragon Con in downtown Atlanta, there's a food court that's attached to a bunch of office buildings. And in the middle of that used to be a shoe shine stand. And those gentlemen had the best seat in the house for the amount of costumes and people passing by every day. And I would go whenever I could, at least once a day during Dragon Con. I would go down there and sit upon that high throne and get my boots done, just so I could watch people pass and have an absolutely fantastic shine on those shoes. So I will have to politely disagree with Mr. Bell Bunce here. So about the men dressing more minimalist, Beau Brummel was actually very, very minimalist. What he wore was very, very plain. It was not bright colors. It was not bright patterns. What it was scrupulously clean and exquisitely tailored. And he, spoke highly of white linen neckcloths, but he would go home 3 or 4 times a day and change his neckcloth so it always bright and fresh. Now, you're talking about a time when everything was basically wood burning. I don't think they even really had gas at that point. So there was a lot of junk in the air from everything being burned and churned up. So yeah, walk across town and your white neckwear would be gray in a matter of minutes. So that was one of the reasons why he got that reputation for being such a snappy dresser, was he took great pains to make sure he was wearing the freshest of clothing. But the actually the very next statement from Bunce is, don't wear trinkets, shirt pins, finger rings, or anything that is solely ornamental. One may wear shirt studs, a scarf pin, a watch chain, and a seal, because these articles are useful, but the plainer they are, the better. Well, I've got cufflinks. I've got my pocket watch, and there's a little where a seal would be. I've got this little star device on the end of my watch chain. Since this is a bow tie, I don't have any pins in the tie. I'm not wearing my jacket, which would have at this point, I've got basically a carnation in the lapel and a pocket square. I admit you shouldn't go overboard. You shouldn't have absolutely everything. I mean, there's the old Coco, I believe it was Coco Chanel, put everything on and take one thing off. I don't think one of everything is too overboard unless they're all very, very bright, unless they all clash. I mean, the rules about wearing the same color metal still holds true that I've completely broken here because I have a gold watch chain and silver cufflinks and a silver ring. But another but I've got to stop that. The next is, of course, don't wear dressing gown and slippers anywhere out of your bedroom. So the lady I saw downstairs this morning would have him in fits. Now, admittedly, I've got a couple of nice dressing gowns slash smoking jackets, and at appropriate events, at say conventions, I might wear them, but that's more of a costume piece than me actually wearing my gown out in public as a dressing gown. You know, I've not run out of my room all of a sudden, tripping over my slippers. What was the next? Oh, this I found funny because you find a lot of pictures showing exactly this. I mean, he mentions don't carry your hands in your pockets, which is just, you know, walking around slouching with your hands in your pockets, but don't thrust your thumbs into the armholes of your waistcoat. And so many pictures in the past have gentlemen with their thumbs in the armholes of their waistcoat just hanging about like this. And it's one of the most unnatural positions. I've never found myself doing this just as a matter of, oh, let me get comfortable. It's such an odd thing to do, but apparently people did it enough that they had to remark on it. Well, hello back. It's good to see you up and about this morning, Victorian romantic. Still digging through don't here. Oh, now here we go. Something that is common sense. Don't expectorate. Men in good health do not need to expectorate. With them, continual expectoration is simply the result of habit. Men with bronchial or lung diseases are compelled to expectorate, but no one should discharge matter of the kind in public places except into vessels provided to receive it. Spitting upon the floor anywhere is inexcusable. One should not even spit upon the pavement, but go to the gutter for the purpose. One must not spit into the fireplace, nor upon the carpet. And hence the rule is for him to spit into his handkerchief, but that is not a pleasant alternative. On some occasions, no other may offer. Don't whistle in the street, in public vehicles, at public assemblies, or anywhere where it may annoy. Memo, don't whistle at all. Now, this is very important in our pandemic times, but people tend to forget, yes, you're wearing a mask. Yes, you should wash your hands, but don't keep carrying your hands to your face, pulling your whiskers, adjusting your hair, or otherwise fingering yourself. Keep your hands quiet and under control. Now, one of the things masks does is keep you from touching your face and touching your hair and carrying whatever germs are on your hand up to these areas where they can be easily introduced into your body. Oh, Gaston, yes. Oh, there is, let me find it, but there is stuff here on smoking. I mean, right here it says, don't carry a lighted cigar into an office or into a shop. And it says, see smoking under in public. Let me find. Well, under today's, don't attempt to shake hands with everybody present. If hostess or host offers a hand, take it. A bow is sufficient for the rest. This is in a drawing room when you're visiting. Let me see if I can find the public. Yeah, here we go. Well, don't carry a cane or umbrella in a crowd horizontally. This is a common trick and a very annoying one to the victims of it. Not many people carry these things today, but when they do, I've seen them carry them sideways instead of vertical. And I've seen many a shin get swatted that way. It says, don't smoke in the street unless in unfrequented ones. Don't smoke in public vehicles. Don't smoke in any place where it is likely to be offensive. Whenever you do indulge in a cigar, don't puff smoke into the face of anyone, man or woman. And let's see. When was bowing phased out? Well, it's actually a good question. I mean, I know some people still do it. It's certainly still custom in other countries like Japan. But I think as more people shook hands, as there was a little more, I guess, closeness. I mean, people would shake hands, clap your hands on shoulders. I think that informality took precedence over the formality of a bow. And therefore, things just kind of naturally shifted to the more informal, more tactile methods of greeting. Yeah, we can't. I found myself several times trying to, starting to try and shake someone's hand and realizing, I shouldn't be doing that. Neither of us are wearing gloves anyway. But yeah, bowing makes perfect sense. There's absolutely no physical contact there at all. I mean, bumping elbows or fists or what have you still makes the same sort of gestures, but I think a bow as acknowledgement is perfectly acceptable. I mean, we're no longer wearing hats, so we can't tip them or raise them. So that's a very good substitute. Actually, let me see if there's. I wanted to touch on hat etiquette. Well, now here's a couple of things. Don't smoke in a non-smoking compartment. Remember the rights and comfort of others. Tobacco smoke always leaves an unpleasant smell. And that goes for vaping, that goes for, any other manner of vapor producing activities, is anything that you're not keeping within yourself, anything that is going back out into the environment, you should not be subjecting other people to that without their explicit agreement that yes, it's okay. But the very next item, don't forget to raise your hat to every lady acquaintance you meet and to every gentleman you salute when he is accompanied by a lady, whether you know her or not. Don't stop your lady acquaintances in the street if you wish to speak with them. Turn and walk by their side and leave them with a raised hat when you are done. So once again, you're not inconveniencing anyone. Their comfort comes first. So you're following along with them, and then take your leave. Let's see. Don't neglect to raise your hat to a strange lady if you have occasion to address her. If she drops her handkerchief and you pick it up for her, raise your hat. In an omnibus, you pass her fare to the conductor, raise your hat. Every little service of the kind should be accompanied by a distant, respectful salutation. And this was back in the day when you weren't supposed to speak to a member of the opposite sex, particularly a man should not be speaking to an unaccompanied woman unless he has been properly introduced elsewhere. So even if you know her on sight, if you've never had a proper introduction made, you shouldn't be addressing her. Now that was back when they were holding these formal ballroom dances, so people could be properly introduced to each other via the hostess. And back when everybody had their visiting cards and they would go pay visits to everyone, that's a whole completely separate avenue of research and explanation that I just don't even want to try to get into now. So many of these books cover that whole strata of activities, what you should have on your card, when you should pay visits, when you should just drop off your card, all of that etiquette and manners around those sorts of activities is very highly codified. Now, on the other hand, I'm sure you've seen lists of glove language and etiquette and fan language, and I only just discovered this recently, but it makes perfect sense. The language of the fan, that little list of what doing different things means, was actually a sales brochure created by a fan salesman. It's not something people actually did unless they were following the document that was distributed by a gentleman who was trying to sell more fans. And the glove language is exactly the same thing. It was a marketing piece, not an actual historical set of circumstances. Yes, big fan and big glove. There's always a big somebody out there trying to wrest your wallet from you. But let me catch up here. What are your thoughts on gender roles in current society? For instance, gentlemen holding doors open, insisting on carrying stuff, assuming women need help when they don't, versus women who may feel uncomfortable with these gestures. Well, it's all about the comfort of others. If you offer and they say no, that's the end of it. Now, opening the door for someone, regardless of sex, that's always it's just a nice, polite thing to do. You're not saying that you think they are incapable of opening the door themselves, but they don't have to slow down. They don't have to interrupt their journey if you're there and can just quickly open the door for them and they can just keep going. Now, if you're making a huge big deal out of it and embarrassing them, well, you shouldn't be doing that. If it looks like someone's having trouble carrying things, I will ask, but that's it. If they say no, no means no. I'm not going to force myself on them. They may think I'm trying to steal something. It's more polite to, I guess, present the fact that you see the situation and offer your assistance, but leave it at that. I mean, I know people were, particularly these days, you never know what someone's intentions are. And because manners like these have, gone by the wayside, what might have been perfectly acceptable over 100 years ago can be downright threatening now. So it's always best to read the room, read the situation, and, be as polite and as deferential as you can when the situation demands it. But don't force yourself or your assistance on anyone for any reason. Oh, yeah. I try to be really good about uh, not running ahead of people, open the door, whatever. If it's natural, if I just happen to be getting to the door first, I will open it. Otherwise, I will let them open the door. If they decide to hold it for me, great. If not, I'm certainly capable of opening the door for myself. Now, the only drawback of opening the door for someone is if it's a rather busy location and you are opening the door so people can either enter or exit, you may find yourself standing there holding the door open for more than just one or two people. And you don't want to find yourself in that situation. But it's often just more amusing than anything else. Now, along those lines, I typically wear a waistcoat, a bow tie. I'm just, normally dressed just a little nicer than the other people in public around me. The biggest drawback of that is people assume I work in whatever store I happen to be shopping. Regardless of whatever uniform those store employees might be wearing, people still assume that I work there. And that happens just regularly. It doesn't matter. In fact, Victorian Romantic and I were shopping. I was helping her pick out some shirts, and I'm in Macy's with, a winter coat on and a mask, but I've got, a bow tie and a waistcoat. And someone was calling to me from across the shop floor looking for help. And I just kept hearing this, hey, you, hey, you. And finally it was like, do you work here? And I'm like, no, sorry, I'm just shopping. It's like, oh, I thought you worked here. You you got the look. And I'm like, sorry. I apologize for looking professional, but that's just the way it goes. But I've been stopped at Target where people wear red and khaki, and I'll be wearing, for example, a blue shirt and a waistcoat and a brightly colored tie. Not this one. And they will stop and ask me for directions or how much something costs. And I guess they assume I'm management, but management would be wearing the same uniform as everyone else. So it's funny now. It's, at this point I just laugh at it. But there are times when I'm in a hurry, and it does get a little annoying. Oh yes, particularly any historically related locations or sites. Particularly if I'm in more of a, say, steampunk, um, a little more Victorian style of dressing. Oh yeah, happens all the time. My favorite question is, are you in a play? And I got that particularly when I'm out with Lolitas for a tea or something. It's like, are y'all in a play? What's going on? It's like, no, we just happen to prefer to dress nicely. And I would get that when I worked at the Renaissance Festival. There's nothing better than pumping gas in your full, medievalish garb, and people asking you, are you filming a movie? Are you in a play? It's like, well, no, I'm just pumping gas. What does it look like? Life is a play. Life, the world's a stage and we are merely players. Any other questions before I dive back into don't? I mean, don't is my favorite because so much of it applies today, but his attitude is just so demanding. Oh, this I'll continue since no questions have presented themselves. But don't deceive intending travelers by putting your luggage about the seats to make believe the seats are all taken. How many of us see people do that today? Not necessarily on, say, an airline, but definitely in the airport, in the lounge where you're waiting for a flight, and you'll have one person who's taking up 4 or 5 seats by placing their luggage everywhere. Uh, don't rush for a seat in a carriage, in church, or at a public entertainment in utter disregard of everyone else, pushing rudely by women and children, hustling men who are older or less active, and disregarding every law of politeness. If one should, on an occasion of this kind, lose his seat in consequence of a little polite consideration, he would have the consolation of standing much higher in his own esteem, which is something. Don't occupy more space in an omnibus or carriage than you require. In this particular, women are greater sinners than men. One who has traveled a good deal in local vehicles declares that he has ascertained the exact arithmetical ratio of the sexes, which is as 6 to 5. For in an omnibus, a seat that will hold 6 men never, if they can help it, accommodates more than 5 women. So back in the days of woman spreading instead of man spreading, although I think he completely disregards the fact that most women were wearing far more clothing than men were, which does tend to take up a little more space. Yeah, and there's the need for privacy even in a public space. And in today's world, yeah, I really don't necessarily want everybody up against me that I've never met before, complete strangers. No desire to have anyone sleeping on my shoulder. So I will, if possible, if it's not completely full, try to get seats to myself, or make sure there's at least a little room on the sides. But if it's that packed, I'd rather stand and let someone else have that seat that might need it than take up more space than I am allowed. Yeah, it's a good point that now during the pandemic, people don't want to get necessarily up on top of each other, and less people are using the various public transports. So, will it stay that way? Maybe. I mean, I think people now have a healthy appreciation for keeping one's distance, and I do hope that will continue uh, much farther into the future. I don't think any of us want to go right back to being, nose to nose with people everywhere. And the next one, don't enter a crowded omnibus or tram car. There doubtless are occasions when one cannot well help doing so, but many times the vehicle that follows will afford plenty of room. A person who enters a crowded public vehicle is an intruder and has no rights that anybody is bound to respect. I've never really thought of it as intruding, but hey, if the bus is full, the bus is full. And if it's a bus or a subway or what have you, there's always going to be another one coming along, unless it is truly at the end of the day, and that's the last run. And I always hate this. Don't bustle into a church after the commencement of service, or into a theater or concert after the performance has begun. To the annoyance of others, arrive early and be seated in time. The manager who will resolutely refuse permission for anyone to enter an auditorium after the curtain has risen will win for himself a golden meed of praise. Long gone are the days when they would actually stop admitting people after the show had started. There are still some theatrical venues that would do that. Certainly not movie theaters. And there's nothing worse than, the show starts at 8. There's going to be half an hour's worth of trailers, and yet people are stumbling in after the opening credits have started, blocking your view, making noise, just interrupting everybody. And that's just, to be honest, that's rude. Just as it's rude to continue talking in the theater, to be on your phone in the theater, to let your children scream in the theater. Yeah, there's a reason why my wife no longer goes to see movies in actual movie theaters. She was long an advocate of watching things at home. Uh, I'd say a good decade before the pandemic. So it's just too many bad experiences, and people just don't forget, or they do forget that they're actually in public and they're not sitting on their sofa at home. Yep. Don't talk at the theater or at a concert when the performance is going on. To disturb others who wish to listen is gross ill breeding, but unfortunately, it is common with the very class who pretend to an exclusive share of good breeding. Now, over 100 years ago, people were still interrupting performances to carry on their own little private conversations. Some things never change. It's still wrong, but people are going to keep doing it because they're thinking only of themselves. They're not thinking of others. And to be honest, that was the biggest problem then, and that's the biggest problem now, is everyone is so self-centered. It's all about me and what I want, and no longer about making sure everyone else is comfortable first. I mean, that's the basic definition of a gentleman or a lady is one who thinks of others first. It's about their comfort, not mine. That's why I'm opening doors for people. I'm, making sure I'm staying out of the way if I need to stop and take a phone call or something. Um, it's just so the world moves so much smoother and faster when you let other cars in front of you, when you move with traffic, when you're walking down the street. You don't just stop. You move off to the side if you need to. You got to think of everybody else. We're all this one big, huge, interconnected machine, and any parts that just decide to stop or go off on their own direction are going to bring the whole thing to a halt. So, lecture over. Any other questions? Oh, that's good about not letting people into hockey games until or while the puck is in play. Yes, more events should be like that. A lot more events should be like that. Now, admittedly, if a puck escapes the rink, um, those can be pretty dangerous. So I'd much rather be able to pay attention to where it is than not uh, not be aware of where the puck is at any given moment while I'm trying to find my seat. That could be um, somewhat dangerous. But it's been a long time since I've actually been to a hockey game. I miss going to events. I think we can all say that at this point. And now a little coffee. So we have, I guess, another half hour. How are we doing on time? Cool. So we have a half hour. So any other questions? Let's see. Oh, these are pretty. I think these are pretty amusing. But don't use slang. There is some slang that, according to Thackeray, is gentlemanly slang and other slang that is vulgar. If one does not know the difference, let him avoid slang altogether, and then he will be safe. Don't use profane language. Don't multiply epithets and adjectives. Don't be too fond of superlatives. Moderate your transports. Don't use meaningless exclamations such as, oh my, and oh cracky. Don't interject sir or madam freely into conversation. Never say ma'am at all. Young people should be taught to say yes, papa, or father if preferred, no, mama, or mother if preferred, with accent on the second syllable of mama and papa. Yes, uncle, no, aunt, and so on, instead of always yes, sir, no, ma'am, etc. On no account should they say pa or ma. Sir is right towards superiors, but it must even in this case be sparingly used. I have no idea where he gets any of that. I mean, sir and ma'am are perfectly appropriate. I think this is one of the few occasions where he's way off field. Don't address a young lady as Miss. Don't say Miss Mary, Miss Susan. This strictly is permissible with servants only. Address young ladies by their surname with prefix of Miss, except when in a family of sisters, a distinction must be made, and then give the name in full. So Miss Mary, instead of Miss Mary, Miss Smith, Miss Johnson. I don't necessarily agree with that either, but don't clip final consonants. Don't say comin', goin', singin' for coming, going, singing. Don't say an for and. Well, now he's just getting into grammar policing. Now, I would like your opinion on this. I think this is kind of interesting. Don't say female for woman. A sow is a female. A mare is a female. The female sex of the humankind is entitled to some distinctive term. So what do y'all think about that? I mean, these days, gender politics is a minefield full of danger. So to be honest, I think he's probably right that, woman is preferred, but everybody has their own preferences these days. And I think it is more polite to ask and find out before making any snap judgments or determinations. Yeah, all of his speech pronouncements, as it were, are very pedantic. Oh, I hate hey you. I'm not a you. I'm not a hey. Excuse me works just as well. Oh, no, I thought these were kind of interesting. Don't conduct correspondence on postal cards. A brief business message on a postal card is not out of the way, but a private communication on an open card is almost insulting to your correspondent. It is questionable whether a note on a postal card is entitled to the courtesy of a response. And you could almost say that goes for Twitter. You know, if you're going to have a private conversation, keep those sorts of things in email or texts and not via Facebook posts or tweets or what have you. And it's interesting that what applied to physical correspondence still applies today, just the technology framework has shifted. This is one of my favorites. Don't, we wish we could say, fasten an envelope by moistening the mucilage with your lips. But this custom is too universally established for protest against it to be of any avail. No one, however, can defend the practice as altogether nice. It was once incumbent on a gentleman to seal his letters with wax, and many fastidious persons adhered to the practice long after wafers came in. A Frenchman, it is said, once challenged an Englishman for sending him a letter fastened by a wafer. "What right," exclaimed the punctilious Gaul, "has any gentleman to send me his saliva?" I think he's right. Wax is so much more refined, and even taping an envelope closed is better than just slobbering all over it. Now, at the time, what they meant by wafer is that the glue was not along the edges of the envelope, but it was a separate little wafer that you would lick and put in place between the flap and the body of the envelope. Whereas the wax would go on the outside, this was on the inside between those two pieces. Stickers work just as well on the outside. You know, I'm a fan of the wax. The little sticks of wax with a wick that you have to light and then maybe drip into a little spoon and then pour that on the... No. Get a hot glue gun. And they sell wax in sticks that fit in the hot glue gun. And then you just do a little dollop, use your seal, done. Not nearly as messy, no smoke to deal with. I have allergies. So I was in heaven once I realized I could use the hot glue gun. I had discovered the practice of letter locking, which is things that, say, Queen Elizabeth did when she was writing to some of her suitors. But it goes back even farther. But that's why you see these old correspondences that are folded really weird, and they may have holes down the edges and wax seals in odd places. And what you would do, for example, one particular method is you would write your letter, you would fold it up, and then fold it in half so it makes just a little thin packet. And then you would take a needle and some thread, and you would poke it through one end of it. So you would basically kind of sew it shut, and then put wax on the outside of that. then you would probably put that maybe in another envelope and send that on. But that way the recipient would know that no one had read the document because it was still sealed with wax and the thread was intact. So look up letter locking. There are hundreds of techniques of doing that same sort of thing, but it was a security measure. And what we think of just, a wax seal with a little bit of ribbon as decorative, or just as a sign that, this person approves the document or basically signs the document with it. A lot of that was actually the remnants of the letter locking. And that's just what it looked like once everything was slit open and unfolded. So I did that as a gift certificate one year for the highest level of attendees at TeslaCon. The tickets were much higher, but it was a huge amount of nice gifts from all the vendors. It was a true VIP experience. And so that was my gift certificate that year, was I wrote out a neat document and letter locked it. And it took me a while to practice. And that's when I learned the hot glue gun technique. So let me see if I can catch up with the comments. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? We've got about 15 minutes left. Now this is a good one here, and it's common sense. We all should know it and follow it, but sometimes it just has to be said. Don't fail to acknowledge by note all invitations, whether accepted or not. Never leave a letter unanswered. Don't fail to acknowledge all courtesies, all attentions, all kindnesses. And in the hustle and bustle of everyday life that's moving at light speed now, sometimes things slip past, but it's just common courtesy to answer someone when they've reached out to you. Even if it's I'm terribly sorry I can't go, that's enough. No need to explain why, but as long as you render an answer, that's the polite thing to do. What do you think is the most off-the-wall, weird manner you ever came across? Trying to remember the exact context. But it was something about, I want to say it had to do with the fans. And then I, completely discounted it later because I found out that it was a marketing, people were teaching it as, this is part of etiquette. And, but it was actually a marketing, I won't say scam, but it was, an advertising technique rather than an actual etiquette thing. But I'd have to go back through and read some of these to find out. I mean, some of this stuff, what was the one? Now, these are also all common sense. Don't underrate everything that others do. Don't overstate your own doings. Don't scoff or speak ill of a rival in your profession or trade. This is in the worst possible taste and shows a paltry spirit. Have the pride and self-respect to overstate the merits of a rival rather than underestimate them. or understate them. And this one I like, don't, if you have a half hour to spare, go and spend it with a man who hasn't. Don't play the accordion, the violin, the piano, or any musical instrument to excess. Your neighbors have nerves and need at times a little relief from inflictions of the kind. If you could manage not to play on instruments at all, unless you are an accomplished performer, so much the better. Now, this I'm kind of bad about because I'm doing it now. Don't read aloud paragraphs which interest you out of a book or newspaper when another person is reading or writing, unless you are sure that such an interruption is agreeable to your friend. And my wife and I will quote stuff to each other out of books or tweets or what have you. And sometimes it's appreciated and sometimes it's not, and it's hard to tell. And this is the last. Don't fail to heed all of the don'ts in this little book. Perhaps you think the injunctions are not needed in your case. This is true of many of them, no doubt, but the best of us are not perfect in manners any more than in anything else. And that was the case as of 1884. And this was published by Griffith and Farren, successors to Newbery and Harris, west corner of St. Paul's Churchyard, London. And I actually have a facsimile of this. There are so many publishers out there, and I use that term very, very loosely, that will do a print on demand based on these PDFs that are scanned and living online. And what they come in are very, very small paperback sizes that are hard to read because it's a print of a scan, and they're much smaller than the original book probably was. It was worth it to get it just so I could have one to read when I'm not near an electronic device. But I would always try to find the actual book than getting potentially scammed by someone who's selling a print on demand based off a PDF, because there's far too many of those out there. If you go looking at Abe Books, some of these companies are now publishing as a new hardback the same scanned PDF, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, but it clogs up the listings. So you have to be very careful to make sure what you're looking for is the real book and not just a hardcover that someone will print only after the order is submitted and then shipped to you from the other side of the planet at some huge exorbitant price just for transport. See any other questions? Nope, I think I'm caught up, but we've got 5 minutes left. I can give you 5 minutes of your morning back, unless there's anything else anybody wants to discuss. Just a quick plug. I'm Jason R. Merrill. I run a company called Blackbird Finery. We sell vintage gentlemen's accessories, cufflinks, tie bars, vintage bow ties, all manner of items. We have stuff for sale on our website, not a ton. I completely understand that what we have isn't for everybody. And, we're trying to get more online. but I have literally thousands of items tucked away. It's hard to get pictures of everything. If there's something you're interested in, you can always shoot me an email. I'm Jason at blackbirdfinery.com. I have a Ko-Fi. If you like what I'm doing and you want to help me continue, I really enjoy doing these panels, but basically I'm doing these for free just because I enjoy doing them. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and pretty much everywhere else as Blackbird Finery. They're popping in links. Thank you all for joining me. I mean, I'm sorry that this ended up being just me kind of reading out of a book, but some of the stuff is just so fascinating, and you don't necessarily know it until you run across it. And I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts and responses to the stuff that, was being published over 100 years ago, because so much of it still fits. That's, to me, what's astounding is common sense is common sense. Good manners really are good manners, whether it was 100 years ago, whether it was 10 years ago, whether it's now. It'll all still be appropriate tomorrow. So I guess, unless anybody else has anything at the last minute, I will salute you with my coffee, and I will hopefully see some of y'all at the social event this afternoon. I'm looking forward to that. So until then, thank you all for attending. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your weekend. And hopefully I will see you at whatever the next one of these events is. Thanks.